Okay, so this is the next episode in Bamagate, outlining the reasons why Jeremy Bamber was framed and the possible solutions and the roadblocks into resolving this situation. As I said in other episodes, I've talked about some of the roadblocks, and those change over the years. And in the last year or so, in my view, there is a new and significant roadblock that is developing that will stop this case moving forward. And again, I'm trying to always look at ways to resolve this. And as I said in previous episodes, I don't think this will be resolved in the normal way. I think it will only be resolved when this becomes more of a problem to maintain the secret than it does become a problem to tell the truth. So one of the things that I did was many years ago I wrote to the Home Secretary at the time, which was Theresa May, and I asked her whether or not she could investigate the case. In fact, I can't even remember what actually was in the letter, because I've written so many and made contact with so many people. I mean, really, lots of people, lots of witnesses and things like that. So anyway, I wrote to Theresa May. I didn't expect anything from it, and nothing came from it, and you know, it wasn't a very thought out approach or anything like that. But interestingly now, the Home Secretary, which is Priti Patel, you know, these videos are being made in February 2021, if I could put a timestamp to it, is actually the Home Secretary. Now, her constituency is in the constituency of the police station where Jeremy and his father called, and the first police officers attended White House Farm all those years ago. And she's made some comments in the past, obviously, about the case. Now, obviously, these circumstances, to resolve this problem, the responsibility of the Police, Foreign and Home Affairs falls on the Home Secretary. And of course, this Home Secretary that puts her in a rather unique, interesting situation, because obviously it's a home area. So let's say she says, oh, you know, let's have an investigation here. Let's, you know, maybe somebody on Netflix decides to make a Stephen Avery type Making a Murderer documentary. You know, somebody wants to, I want to make my name in you know, television, and this is the best story that I've come across for ages, which I've actually had that conversation with some fairly famous documentary makers, and you know, their response was quite interesting at the time. Maybe I'll talk about more of that later. Anyway, let's say a scenario. So that would put the Home Secretary in a situation of, do I call for an investigation, which is maybe going to make the police in my home constituency not very happy? So in that situation, she might have to make a choice against short-term not making friends with the police or not putting them in a particularly good light, and long-term. Now, Priti Patel, if you look at her personality and you look at British politics history, it's sometimes fairly common for the Home Secretary to become Prime Minister. And obviously, Priti Patel is, in my view, you know, I'm not giving a political opinion here, she's a fairly strong personality, and you know, she's obviously a woman. You know, the last female Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher, and she made quite an impression upon British politics and things like that. It's potential to think that maybe she might have aspirations in the future to become Prime Minister. So that puts this case in a very interesting dynamic, because if she, let's say, calls for an inquiry now, I don't think we're anywhere near that at the moment, but let's say she did, she would be faced with if I do this, will I have the support from all the various aspects of government to become Prime Minister? Will people trust me and say, yeah, but you know, you let us down on this case, you forced an investigation on this case, this didn't make it look good? Or she could have the other option of not doing anything and then trying to move her career, let's say if she does, into Prime Minister. In that situation, you then might find that it's almost like an unexploded bomb in her political career. If things moved forward in the next few years and she was Prime Minister, and somebody made a documentary, somebody pushed the issue, and there became a bit of a public outcry saying this case is relevant today, we do want to know what happened, and if it absolutely is true that, you know, this guy who lost all of his family was framed just to protect the public, you know, the public image of the police force and the justice system, and, you know, he wasn't able effectively to campaign against his conviction because you took evidence away from him, you know, without good reason to. You know, this might actually be almost like an unexploded bomb in her career. It could also be used by maybe her opponents to try and derail her attempts to become Prime Minister. So the point that I'm trying to make is this is another one of those roadblocks in the case. And it's almost quite incredible, really, when you take a look at, you know, as I've said to you, there's links to the royal family, there's links to, you know, a paper trail up to the government covering it up. There's a whole 35 years of police forces, forensics, appeal courts, you know, failing to see the absolute obvious here and making, in my view, truly short-term awful decisions, stupid decisions, you know. But I can see a scenario where, because of who the Home Secretary is, because of the potential future career that she might be aspiring to, and also, you know, where the world is today economically. Now, in the 80s, I've spoken about this in previous episodes, in the 80s we were undergoing, in England, some fairly difficult economic times, and Margaret Thatcher was being a fairly tough leader when it came to the miners and you know, moving things forward, you know, and annoying a lot of people, you know, having quite a lot of conflict. She needed to be a very strong leader to force those changes. Now, I think a lot of the world, and including Europe, is facing similar types of challenges now. As I said, this is recorded in March 2021, so this is after a year of lockdown. We're seeing interest rates beginning to rise, we're beginning to see businesses fail, we're printing huge amounts of money. I think in the future years we're going to have a significant economic problem similar or worse than the 80s. And in that circumstances, I think we're going to need a significant leader like we had, or like Britain had in the 80s. And I think this case, because of, as I said, Priti Patel's constituency is it Witham, where, you know, the incident took place, and she's Home Secretary now. I think this could potentially impact her political career. I certainly think it creates a very interesting dynamic, like the coroner around the case, where you say, yeah, do I expect her to be cooperative or you know, would want an inquiry into this? Absolutely no way. But I'm sure she would understand that maybe this might cause problems further down the road. So, although the case is you know, this is now talking forward, what I want to try and do is give people an understanding of the various layers of the case and how historically, you know, the decisions that have been made over the years have just simply caused greater and greater problems and not really resolved everything. And going forward, how not resolving things by today potentially create even bigger problems going forward. You know, as I say, it might be a situation where you get robbed of a choice of a good leader at a critical time in Britain's history simply because of this situation. So, you know, I think the dynamics with Priti Patel as Home Secretary and maybe as a future Prime Minister put an interesting dynamic on the case, and it's something that I now consider one of the additional roadblocks in terms of resolving the case. So, as I said in the previous episode, you know, because there almost is no way that the justice system and the government can negotiate this. There's no great solution for them. You know, it's both ways are painful. Because there's no way that you can really negotiate sensibly in this, I think the only way left to negotiate is via a documentary, a film, or a Netflix type scenario where the media begins almost to say, well, this is the narrative, now we're going to start to sort of ridicule you in terms of what are you going to tell us? Are you going to tell us the truth, or you're not going to tell us the truth? And I say that with a bit of difficulty, really, because I understand the importance of keeping the justice system, political system working and effective and having confidence in it. Certainly in difficult times, you definitely need good effective government. And obviously, you know, this challenges that, and it doesn't really do them any favours. But I do think it's getting to that point where if they're not prepared to negotiate, which they haven't negotiated for 35 years, you know, whatever Jeremy's done, they've never allowed him to negotiate on a fair level. It's just a long story of cover-ups and you know, destruction of evidence, and just, you know, it's just been a circus. I think, you know, you get to the point where you say, okay, let's just negotiate without you and let's just ridicule you. And that's one of the things that, having moved away from England, I do see England's actually very, very good at, you know, with its political thing. You know, you have like Spitting Image, you know, when politics gets really crazy, the British switch to this, okay, we're not going to, you know, treat you as politicians, we're just going to, you know, ridicule you and, you know, negotiate on that, say, you know, level until you get yourselves to a position. And that's one of the things that, you know, I might actually do that in the future. One of the things I was thinking about doing is writing off to Essex Police and saying, you know, can I have an online interview with you, and can I ask you with, you know, some of the questions about, you know, why did you destroy this evidence? Why are you withholding this? Now, of course, they can't negotiate with that. They can't say, oh yeah, you know, we destroyed the night dress because Jeremy was getting really close to the DNA evidence, and, you know, we'd let him have the night dress, you know, he would be out today and attention would be back on us, and we'd have to defend ourselves, and somebody might even ask to see copies of those, you know, police notes, and, you know, we'd be screwed, you know. So they won't be able to say that, so they will have to revert to their, you know, no comment approach of dealing with things. You know, we'd have to issue another position statement or something like that. So of course, you know, what I thought about is, you know, in that situation, you almost say, well, they wouldn't want to interview you, so maybe you could do a way of ridiculing those and putting the questions. And I might actually do that to demonstrate what I mean. But that's certainly what I think is a part of the solution. So as I've said before, if you watch this series and you say, yeah, I want to know, you know, I can't believe this has happened. I want to know the truth, and I don't know how to support. Just forward these things. There's always, when you watch television or you read something, you know, as I found over the years, you know, there's an email you can find on somebody's line, and, you know, just spread the story. You know, I think it's a story that speaks for itself. I think there are so many interesting aspects of this case. I genuinely believe, and I say this to documentary makers that I've met over the years, I say this, you know, either you will make this documentary or the next guy in the line or the next guy that. I said, because of the aspects of this case, and I said there's some truly great aspects of this case, and, you know, even some of them on these series I've not touched on, it is only a matter of time before somebody presents the other narrative. And I said, you know, Mark Williams Thomas, I think, is a good example. You know, there was always noise around Jimmy Savile, and he was a guy that said, okay, you know, I'll tell the truth, I'll tell the other narrative. And it changed things forever. And I do see the potential in Jeremy Bamber's case to have the same effect. That, you know, I mean, that's why I became involved in the case, because it challenged my belief of society so strongly. It was like, these things just don't happen. You know, there's no way that, what the evidence is suggesting here happened. There's just no way. And I have to be honest, when I discovered what actually happened, it took me a while to actually, it challenged my real value system about how society worked. And okay, now I actually think it gives you a better understanding of how the world works. It allows you to see things differently. So it's been a very positive thing. But, it certainly challenged me, and I certainly would expect most people would be, truly shocked. And, as you see with those things, there's always those crime documentaries. They're always very, very popular. So I do honestly believe it is only a matter of time before somebody makes a documentary. The last person that I spoke to, I went to London for a day to see somebody. It was an interesting situation. And I said virtually these identical words to them. And, they were like, yeah, there's this part of the case. And, when I was telling them pretty much what I've said in this series here now, you could see their eyes just like, wow, it was, wow, what a story. And, the enthusiasm was quite dramatic, was quite interesting. And then, of course, a few months ago I had an email from the campaign team saying, just to inform you about, these people making a documentary, they seem to have gone in completely a different direction and they're producing a documentary on this now. And I was like, oh yeah, here we go. It's the same scenario. There's an immense amount of interest. And then you suddenly think, it all seems to evaporate, And of course, my opinion is that, like the public interest immunity, there is, like them trying to threaten me, stay away, we don't want this story, there is a campaign in the background to stop the true narrative coming out. And I do think for the last 35 years that's broadly been effective, but I do think there will be a time that, the story speaks for itself, and I don't think that's a sustainable long-term course, And I would certainly, I suppose if I was talking to governments directly, I would say, make a decision how you want this to go. If you want to find yourself like the police force around Stephen Avery's case, where, if you want to find yourself in that situation, cross your arms, do nothing, and you might well find yourself there. But if you want to try, take control, if you want to try and make things better, if you want to try and make this a success story, not a thorn in your side for another 20, 30 years, because it won't go away if Jeremy passes away. Whether they will do it in Jeremy's lifetime, I don't know. It would be nice to, it would be great to see Jeremy walk free and get what he wants for all this time. But, whether or not the government will get themselves together enough to be able to do that will be interesting to see. But anyway, that's the end of the episode. Again, thanks very much for listening. Hopefully it's provided a better understanding of the case, and hopefully another series will go into more detail of the case. Thanks very much.